Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Dr. Jones here. And as I told you before, we're going to pick up our conversation about cells and about atoms. And we're going to be talking about how we go from a single atom to a single cell. Now, as always, we start off with our standard. Now, again, just like before, we have our middle school standard and we have our high school standard. Now, in our middle school standard, remember we talked about specifically the functions of cells. Okay, so how does a cell carry on the characteristics of life? With the high school portion of this, we're going to be talking about the hierarchy of life, meaning how do we go from one cell to like a blue whale? All right, so let's first start with this first topic, or this first standard here that literally talks about cells being the smallest unit of life. Now, as we have here, atoms are the smallest unit of matter. And if you remember from before, matter is anything that has mass in grams and takes up space. So it's not or, but it's and. So again, when we're talking about matter, matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Okay? So if we're looking at this, we said that mass is measured in grams and volume can be measured in liters. So we talked about all of that before. Now, when we talk about a cell is the smallest unit of life. Now, here's the thing. If you open up a dictionary, if you Google life, you're going to get a bunch of different definitions. For scientists, when we talk about life, we have to talk about the characteristics of what living things do that other non-living things don't do. And there's 7 characteristics. There's 7 things that all living things must do. And again, for those of you who are my middle school students, we went over this, but not specifically for a cell. So in this conversation, we're going to talk specifically about how a cell goes through all of these characteristics and is considered to be the smallest unit that can carry this on. All right? So let's start with the first one, organization. Now, when we talked about organization previously, I just said that think of organization as being like rules to the game, okay, or like how things happen. When we're talking about cells, organization really goes to, well, what atoms, since cells are matter, make up cells, okay? So if you're looking at it, all components or parts of a cell are made up of a combination of 4 macromolecules. Now, let me stop. Macro, large. Molecule, that would be something that has more than one atom. Think of it that way. So we're talking about these blocks, these units that have more than one atom, but they make up all these different components of a cell. So let's start with the first one. It's easy. Proteins, okay? And when we're looking at proteins, let me do this because I noticed I got a little something on my screen. There we go. Now, when we talk about proteins, understand that proteins are very complex molecules. They actually come in 4 varieties. You have a primary, or very simple protein. You have your secondary, which some people call a corkscrew or a pleated sheet. You have your tertiary, which was like the 3rd level, which is 3-dimensional, and then you have one that is called a quaternary, which would be like the 4th level. Okay, so you know, like if you're going up a flight of stairs, the 4th level is the most complex, the highest level. Okay, now in addition to proteins, we also have what's called lipids or fats. Now the thing about lipids is they come in a bunch of different varieties as well. But what you'll find is that they do different jobs. So when we talk about proteins, think of structure. Think of that proteins do a specific job. Think of a lipid as storage, kind of like a bank. And a bank of what? A bank of energy. Okay? Now, the other energy molecule that we're familiar with are carbohydrates, which are sugars. So think of this as being the bank. Think of this as being like money in your pocket. Because you need carbohydrates for that ready, quick energy. Okay? I'm going to tell you, I have a sweet tooth. I like candy. I shouldn't, but I do. It's my weakness. And so what you'll find, just like, with anything, if you eat candy, it's going to send your levels of energy and sugar levels up. Once you burn it away, it'll go back down. One thing that I don't have a lot of is a lot of fat. So I tell people, you know what? I'm not going to be the guy that goes on Survivor. Skinny guys and muscular guys never make it through Survivor. If you watch the show, you will see every single season they don't make it. Why? First of all, they don't have the extra calories. And once things get real hard, they don't have the fat. It is what it is. Now, the last one, nucleic acids. You're familiar with DNA and RNA, right? Well, that's what this is. Now, yes, we have these 4 molecules, but you may say, well, where's the order? Here's where the order comes in. I picked these models because I wanted you to pay very close attention to the color scheme. Here's what I'm saying. If you're looking at this, what you'll find is that carbon atoms here are black, and all of these have some black or dark gray spheres. Hydrogen is white, okay, or light gray. Oxygen is red, and if you look at every single one of these, they have carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. Here's the other thing I want you to notice. Some of these have blue in them. Blue represents nitrogen. Some have orange, that's phosphorus, and one that you can't see, but it is in here, is sulfur, that'd be green. So what you find is that all cells have these 6 elements, okay? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, all right? And together, they spell the word CHOMPS, which is very interesting why this is here, but I'll explain what CHOMPS stands for. C-H-O-N-P-S. Not chomps with an M, but chomps, like Chauncey. Okay? Something like that. Alright. Now, let's talk about the next one. Growth and development. Now, it's not like you're going to have a small cell that's going to be a big cell, okay? Because cells don't like change size that way. But when we talk about growth and development in terms of a cell, what we're talking about is you could start out with a cell being one thing at a particular point in the cell cycle. So like stem cells. And then those can break up and become other types of cells. Okay. So these mesenchymal cells are cells that'll give you things like muscle tissue. These, which are your endoderm cells, give you things like lung tissue. And these are ectoderm cells. Think of these as being the ones that will give you like skin, things of that nature. Which is one reason why stem cells are so important. Because what you find is if you get a stem cell and expose it to the right kind of hormones, you can make whatever other cell you need in your body. Okay? So again, that's what is meant by growth and development in terms of cells. Energy production. Now, here's the thing. All living things have to process energy. And where do they get the energy from? Outside of the cell, or like its surrounding. Now, if you look at the mitochondria actually takes sugar and breaks it up into giving you energy. Now, I want to say this. I know. So many of you have heard mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Listen, if you hear somebody that says that a mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, I'm not saying to slap them, but if you do, it's understandable. Because it's not the powerhouse of the cell. No. The mitochondria is how cells convert sugar, the carbohydrate, into energy, which is actually a nucleic acid, ATP. We'll talk about that later. The other way that cells can process energy, and not every cell, but certain cells, is by converting light energy into sugar molecules. Well, we know this as photosynthesis. Now, you may say, okay, well, where does that happen? That's chloroplast. So again, think of a cell, think of its organelles. It has an organelle dedicated to converting sugar into energy, and some cells have an organelle dedicated to convert light energy into chemical energy in the form of sugar. Okay? So, energy processing. Response to the environment. Now, here's the thing. There's a process called tonicity. Okay? And think of tonicity as just water availability. But there's a barrier in between. It's like this. You see I'm dressed, looking good, you know what I'm saying? So, after like a day at work, sometimes at night, I don't go out to a club. So I get to the door, I see a doorman. Doorman sees me, I'm like, what's up? He said, what's up? What's the cover? $20. He looks at me, yeah, $20. Boom, go in, right? Then you have some of these knuckleheads wearing tennis shoes, pants sagging, just headbangers. Yeah, man, what's up? Look, I want to get in the club, and what's going to be. And the man look at him like, sorry, sir, but no. What you talking about? Wait, no. And so what I'm saying is, sometimes you have a membrane that is semi-permeable, meaning it'll let some things through, but not others. So, when you're looking at cells, one of the semi-permeable membranes is the cell membrane. And what it'll allow to go through is water. So, depending on if you have water that is fresh, meaning you have no salts in them, water that has a lot of salts in them, or water that is comparable to the cell, depends on the movement of water into and out of the cell. That's tonicity. Okay. So we have hypertonic, hypotonic, and isotonic. Now, here's the thing. When you put a cell in, especially animal cell, different types of water, it will react to it. Because living things do that. Now, one thing about cells is that you have to be able to maintain homeostasis, the inside environment, which means you have to be able to regulate this. So what you find is, although that happens at the cell layer, the cell membrane, there are ways that the cell membrane regulates what goes in and goes out to make sure that I don't lose too much water or I don't take too much water on. So there are actual organelles that'll push or shunt water out. A lot of times it can happen through proteins, or bring nutrients in, also happening through proteins, as well as the membrane itself being semi-permeable to let certain things like water and air through. Okay? That's the regulation side of this. Reproduction. Now, understand that cells can reproduce one of two ways. Meiosis, mitosis. And meiosis is where, remember, you have one cell that becomes four. That's the one for sexual reproduction. And then you have mitosis, where you have one cell becoming two. That's kind of like the budding or the cloning that you'll see in bacteria. But again, cells, all of them, go through some form of this, one or the other, or sometimes both, depending on the type of cell. And then adaptation, okay? And so when we talk about adaptation, and I know it looks like I have another 6, but forgive me. We're talking about how the last universal common ancestor, meaning this is the cell that all other cells came from, actually adapted to become other organisms. Here's what I mean. If you think about it, from Luca, last universal common ancestor, you get bacteria, you get protists or protista, you get fungi, he's a fun guy, plant cells, and animal cells. So what you find is that cells go through all of these processes, which is why a cell is considered to be the smallest unit of life. Because things like viruses, they don't go through all of this, which is why a virus isn't alive. Now, the next time we meet, we're going to be talking specifically about how a single cell goes from being one single cell organism to a multi-cell organism like a blue whale. I will see you next time. Have a great day.